Welcome to Season 2 of Under the Sisterhood. Over the 31 days of March, we are celebrating 31 Women's March of Voices during Women's History Month. We will have intimate conversations that will uncover each woman's superpower and find out how they use these superpowers to help other women. That's 31 days honoring 31 women and their superpowers. This is a podcast to celebrate women and all that they do in our world. I'm Elizabeth Elfenbein. Let's get under the hood. Today, we're celebrating Melanie Whitney, a daughter, sister, friend, thought leader, and mindfulness teacher and coach. Melanie has been a communication studies professor for over a decade, teaching students how to mindfully communicate in their relationships. In 2018, she started the Institute for Empowerment, creating training and coaching programs for mindful living and leadership. Melanie's work has taken her around the world, speaking on stages for TEDx, LinkedIn, and the United States military. Her mission is to teach busy professionals how to integrate more mindfulness into their communication, relationships, and mindset. I couldn't be more delighted to be celebrating Melanie during Women's History Month. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm so excited to have you. I have been having the most interesting conversations. Women are so amazing. And of course, it's just wonderful to be able to do it during Women's History Month and really shed light on all of you beautiful souls. So why don't we get going?
Let's do it. Let's dive in.
So this is the big question I'm asking every woman, but everyone's story is unique to them. So if you would share with the audience your story about your life and who you are, and and how you
Yeah,
arrived at that.
sure. I mean, it's so funny this question. Whenever I get it, I think, oh my God, like I imagine myself in a library of books and like which story do you tell? Because there's so many, as you said, there's so many stories that lies in just one person. And I can't imagine all the stories you've heard, but when you said that, I guess what really comes to mind most of the time when people ask me that question is I think about my journey uh as a soul, as a human, and also as a woman, as the focus of this podcast. So I grew up in Southern California in just like a pretty average childhood, you would say, right? As I would describe, my parents were middle class, working very hard, and I think that hard work, watching them tried to raise me and my two siblings, was they had to divide and conquer. So they had to, one of them worked a night shift, one of them worked a day shift. So we always had a ride to school, or, someone to cook dinner. And so like there was always this partnership. I could see that they were trying to make the, ends meet, if you would, so to speak. And because of that, they really pushed education and we're really big on go to school, get good grades, all of those things, which was so easy for me because I'm such a nerd. Like I love school. I was always reading and like A+ student and just like that poster child. So I was always, I mean, I knew I wanted to go to college when I was like 7 years old. I was like, I'm
That's
going to college.
awesome.
I was like very determined little kid, and I still am. But I share that because the drive that I had was very obvious. All my teachers, all my mentors were like, this kid, like, get out of her way or help her out, like one or the other. And because of that, school was everything I threw myself in. And I became really just like obsessed with academia and learning. And so I went through college, I got my bachelor's, and then I went on to my postgraduate degree. And again, everything in my mind was school is my ticket for upward mobility. School is my ticket to not suffering or struggling like my parents did. Like, so it was my
Mm.
golden ticket. Like, a lot was riding on this thing. And then I graduated and I had all these, I mean, as you know, and as you shared in my intro, I'm in education and now I also have my business where I'm helping people with mindfulness and their relationships and things like that. But I never, ever wanted to become a teacher, ever. That was so not in the plan because what I thought teaching and what I saw was like all the teachers I see are struggling to make ends meet, just like my parents were. Why would I do that? So I was chasing all the money and the like glamour and like the fast-paced jobs. I moved to LA, like, I thought that's where I was going to find all the things I was looking for. And I mean, long story short, after chasing jobs, and especially what I thought was my dream job, I was doing event planning in LA. I got a rude awakening and I got laid off because the company wasn't doing well and they were downsizing. And I was just like, I think it was 2024 when that happened. And I was like, 24-year-olds get laid off? Like, that's a thing? Like, okay, I was here and I just bought a new car and I was just about to sign on a lease
Wow.
for an apartment. So it was really like, I thought my life was just like, I thought I had made it. I thought I finally reached, all those years of school that I went through. And now I finally made it. And then it just got pulled right from underneath me. And then I found myself living with my parents in my twin size bed, in my childhood bedroom. And I went back to my old college job of, I think it was like, I was making like $12 an hour. And I had a master's degree. And I was like, what am I doing with my life?
It's so interesting, those inflection points, something, major happens and it forces you, the universe, it forces you into like really rethinking, reimagining, reinvention. You're 24 years old, so I don't even know that I would call that reinvention, but certainly pivoting. Like, you're a startup, if you will. So you're pivoting the direction. You're almost forced to. But I think, and I'll let you continue your story, but I think that this journey that you then took really led you to a
Mhm.
place because one, had you described, one was you seeking these external things, so talk about
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So you go back, you have your master's degree, you're working a $12 an hour job, and you feel like, what am I doing with my life? What was that moment for you?
I mean, I'm stubborn, so it took more for me to surrender. Like I thought, okay,
Nice.
well, okay, I had to step back. Like no big deal. Like I'll find another job and I'll find. And so I kept seeking externally. Like you said, I was really chasing money. That was my external. That's what I equated success and wealth to be, was a financial goal. Right. And I had been conditioned to think that I didn't know any better. I was 24. My brain wasn't even developed completely yet at 24 years old. And so I just got caught for years in this cycle of, it was really interesting. It was like this push and pull, like intuitively. I'd get drawn to, like, I had mentioned to you in a previous conversation about The Power of Now, the book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I
Mm.
came across that and I think the first time I came across it, I was about 20 years old. And then I came across it again around this time in my life. And I was like, ugh, this damn book. And I was like, I could deal with this later. And then like went on to my merry way to find another job. So it was always this push and pull. I was very aware of that I was chasing external, but I somehow felt like I was the, I don't know, exception. Like, well, that book isn't for me. Like, no, like it doesn't mean me. Like I was still too arrogant, I think, to realize that's everyone. That's all of us, no matter what.
And you know what I think is also interesting is like when we grow up in environments and circumstances where we see our parents struggling or what have you, of
Yeah.
course, we are conditioned to say we don't want that. So it's not even
Hmm.
that we're aware of seeking the external, but things like monetary success
Hmm.
fills a void, a gap, and it's not even that we can define it. It's like it fills something inside, which is kind of security and safety. It's not so much that you want, it just represents what you didn't have before. And I've been in the same boat. And at the time you're 24. I mean, it took me to well into my mid 50s to say, you know what? All of that doesn't really matter to me because what's really important is what's inside, and giving up all of that external stuff, which was a lot. So I think,
Yeah.
to figure that out at 24 is fantastic. So let's keep going because this is real. I love this story.
I mean, it's so funny. So I think another big inflection point was, I was trying to find a job. I couldn't. And it was just tough. Like I said, I'm living it with my parents, and that was just tough being an adult and living with your parents and like for all sorts of other reasons. But then I got a call from a university to be an emergency substitute for a communication studies class. And I thought, okay, like what the hell? Like, sure, I need the money. Like it wasn't like I said, I wasn't like, oh, I want to be a teacher. I thought I got my master's because I thought when I'm pushing retirement, I'll teach. Like when I want to slow down, I'll teach. So I had no interest in doing that now, but I needed money. I needed to pay my bills. So I was like, sure, let's just do it. Screw it. Well, I'll figure it out. So I did it and I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is actually kind of cool. I'm teaching all these young minds how to communicate more clearly, how to have healthier relationships. And these are all things they're definitely going to need and use, not only in the future, but right now in their young adult lives. They're going to need this now. And so that kind of what first kind of piqued my interest in mindfulness. Because when I started to see my students really learning these skills, I realized that there was almost, I remember looking at a textbook specifically, and there was one paragraph in one chapter about self awareness.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's it. That's it. That's all we're going to cover is this tiny little paragraph when I can give them all the tools in the world. But if they don't have the self awareness, does it really matter?
I love that.
And that's really where I started kind of like, hold on a second. And that's when I started really diving into the more mindfulness stuff.
And that's beautiful. And I think you could almost like own that when you're in a university and they focus so little on that. That can almost be like your thesis. That could be your book as a professor or what have you. They come into your class to focus on that. That's really interesting. And I think you made a great point, Melanie, which is you can teach them and give them all the tools in the world. You can teach them all these modalities and what have you. If they don't have self-awareness, nothing's gonna stick. So I think that that's really, really interesting. So here you are, you're what, like around 25, you're teaching in universities.
Mhm.
How did that sort of happen? How did that evolve into, you've been teaching for 10 years. So you went in
Yeah.
as
So,
an emergency teacher, a substitute,
yeah,
and it rolled
I
into
did.
something.
And it rolled into like, hey, do you want to stick around? We got more classes. And I thought, sure, why the heck not? But it was part time. So I was still looking for other jobs and I was still looking for other work to, again, make ends meet. And it was so frustrating because I was like, I went to school to avoid this. And here I am working multiple jobs to pay my bills. It was really, it was like the puzzle of my life at that time. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Because in my mind, I did everything right. I did everything they told me to do. They, right? The universal they, society. They told me to do these things and I followed it to a T. And this is what I get for it. And so I really went through the stages of grief. I was angry. I was like, all the things. And then it wasn't until years, Elizabeth, years went by. And it wasn't until about 2015 ish that I really started dabbling with like, what happens if I just do a little workshop on the integration of mindfulness and communication? Let's see what happens. I'm going to test it on my students. They loved it. And then that's when I started taking it a little bit outside of the classroom. And I started realizing the whole world needs these skills, not just these college students. And so many people don't have access or the time to research on their own on how to do these things. And that's when I started really getting intrigued and started building my own business around this and thinking, okay, I'm going to do a workshop here. I'll try this out. And I started just asking, putting the feelers out in my network of friends who are working professionals and say, hey, do you think your HR would want to do something like this? And they're like, sure, let me ask. Let me see. And that just kind of snowballed from there. But I was really reluctant to call myself a mindfulness coach or teacher because in my mind at that time, and again, I came from a world of academia and everything is show me your qualifications,
Exactly. It's all credential
prove
based.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, prove it to me. And so I was like, I'm not a monk, I'm not a Buddhist, I don't have any certification of years of this. And so I felt really like an imposter when I first started. And because of that, I did not focus a lot on the mindfulness component, as far as like I would bring in research, again, academia, right? I'll bring in research,
Makes
but I
sense.
really was reluctant to lead a meditation. I was like, who am I to lead a meditation? Like, what? That's not me. Like, no, no, no. I was so scared to embody that and to make it my own because I was so fearful that someone was going to come say, you're not qualified to speak on this.
You
And
know what's
that held me back for a long time.
And you know what's, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you know what's
No, no,
interesting
you're
about
okay.
that, Melanie? What's really interesting to me is that that is one of the downsides. Academia is wonderful, but one of the downsides of academia is it's so theory based and scientific and database. It doesn't allow that creative side where you could go out, you could create something new and innovate and create a workshop that maybe applies some of those modalities and theories into it, but is something all of your own. And I think, well,
Mhm.
listen, the good news is you're doing it today. The bad news is
Yes.
that you would have had to suffer it. It's almost like that was part of your journey to figuring it out, to understanding your voice, right? And to
Hmm.
to using your voice and your intellect. And I think,
Yeah.
going back to your comment, I never wanted to be a teacher. You were such a good student. It's not surprising that you would, there would be the paradigm
Of
shift from student to
course.
teacher. It just makes total sense. And not to do it full time, because I think the beauty is that having your own business allows you that creative canvas, if you will, to share your vision and your approach to self-awareness, mindfulness, and all of that. So continue.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that was the big theme. And I think a lot of women go through feeling like they're not good enough or having imposter syndrome. Who am I? Right. All those voices. And I had to really work through all of my limiting beliefs, which is so funny because academia empowered me so much. And it also instilled all these limiting beliefs at the same time. So it was
That's
so
really interesting.
it was
That's
so
a
confusing. So confusing. I didn't know how to navigate that. I was like, I know I'm smart, but I feel not smart enough. And I'm like, what? This is insane. I felt it was a struggle. Lots of therapy helped me unravel all of this and a lot of, work, internal work on myself. And ultimately I just finally found the courage. And again, this took years to be like, you know what? I'm just going to kind of dabble. I'm going to be creative and I'm going to just do what I do best, which is I wanted to make mindfulness and communication skills more, what's the word? I wanted to make it more relatable.
I
Like,
was
I
going
didn't
to
want
say
people to think
accessible.
mindful
Yeah.
and accessible, both. I
Mm.
was like, I don't want people to think that, oh, I can't be mindful if I'm not going to meditate every day. There's so many other ways to adopt and practice those muscles of acceptance, presence, non-judgment,
Mm.
detachment.
Mm.
There's so many ways. And that's where my teacher brain was really useful because students don't all learn the same. So I'd constantly have to figure out, okay, how can I teach this a different way? How can I teach this a different way? And that has been my thing of, I want to make mindfulness less scary, less intimidating for people so that they can apply it to their relationships, their communication, and their mindset.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that's wonderful. Do you see a difference between men and women as you're teaching this, like in your classroom?
Teaching the mindfulness component or the
Yes,
communication component.
sort of both. Like what's the dynamic in your classroom? Is it different between genders or not really?
Well, it's funny. I see less of a difference in the classroom with the Gen Z. So I'm with Gen Z, and I feel like I've had the benefit of seeing both the millennial and the Gen Z generation because I've been teaching long
Mm,
enough. And the Gen Z, they're much more open. They are much more anxious. I do notice that. So they do
mm,
need a lot more warming up, but they're very open. And when I'm doing private coaching, I do notice that the men that I honestly did not expect to have so many male coaching clients in the beginning. I was
mm.
like, that's all I was attracting. I was like, what's happening here? I mean, I didn't care, but it was not what I thought. It was not what I expected. And what I found is that a lot of the men that have come to me for coaching have wanted tactical, like they want a how to. Okay, I know I need to be better with my emotions. How do I do that? So they need like homework. They want homework. They want me to give them a step by step. When I have found that a lot of the female clients that I've worked with, and this is again a small sample size, this is just my clients, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have a lot of the women I've worked with, it's been more about mindset and undoing a lot of conditioning, and more like, no, you got this, and let's think about it this way, and let's try this. And so it's been more of a mindset shift, when with a lot of my male clients it's been more of a let's try this thing, let's
Right.
try this
I like that.
exact tool.
One is tactical, one's strategic in a way. You know, it's just different.
Yes.
And so that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That's really, really
Yeah.
interesting to me. I would imagine, regardless, that anybody, because you have such a nice way about you and and you do make it relatable. You take a subject that people don't want to deal with. It's hard because you have to look within. It goes back to that
Hmm.
self-awareness. Do I really want to do the work? You know, it's about wanting to do the work, is it people who are struggling that come to you? Is it people who are like an A minus and just want to turbocharge who they are? Like, recognizing, an unmet need or something in self.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely, I mean, I always say that I'm only going to work with people who are ready to do the work. I'm not here to convince you that you should do the work. Like, that's not
Right.
my job. That's
Right.
not,
And
I
by the
can't
way,
do that.
and guess what? They're not going to do it. So it's a waste of time. I'm
Yeah.
learning a lot about that over time, over my lifetime. You cannot force
Yes.
people who sit on the fence or sitting on the fence for a reason because they don't want to get to the other side. And so you just have to
They're not
accept
ready
it.
yet.
It's okay. It's
Hmm.
okay. But when you're ready, I'm
Yep.
here. I'm on the other side waiting for you, you know? And
Exactly.
that's when we can get
Exactly.
real. And so here you are doing this. Talk about, like, so you're in the midst of it. You have this wonderful business. Like, how's it going? What's it like being Melanie Whitney, day to day?
It's hectic. It's crazy busy. Sometimes I don't know how I do all the things that I do. I still teach. I teach full time at the university, and right now I'm still running my business. And I'm not ready to let go of one or the other yet. I feel like they're still merging, and I don't know where all the pieces are falling yet. So I'm just kind of like, all right, this is my life right now. It's a little chaotic, but it's amazing chaos. Like, it's fun chaos. So there are times I need to slow down, recharge, take a day off, go recharge into nature. I love to go hiking, and I recharge that way. So I really am pretty good about doing that. I used to be terrible at that because I would just push, 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 push. But I mean, right now I'm just developing courses. I'm developing more in depth type of like training programs for like corporate wellness, things
Mm,
like that, because I'm finding that a lot of businesses are now seeing, especially post pandemic when mental health became such in the limelight, right? People are seeing that, oh, this is not going away. People are human and they are showing up as their whole selves to work, not just their little robot working selves that some managers wish they would be, right? So I think it's been a really like a rewiring of a lot of leadership strategy and how to manage people more mindfully. So I call it mindful leadership. So I'm focusing on a lot of that, and a lot of just coaching. People I'm noticing are wanting that one-on-one. How do I do this? Help me out. And I take great joy in the coaching and the teaching. I love teaching, really, really do. But the coaching is really rewarding as well because you get to see people make those aha moments of like, I did it. Guess what? Like, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that.
I think that's really interesting. The one-on-one coaching, the juxtaposition of one-on-one coaching, and then the teaching in a classroom setting where you're literally able to impact future generations. Like, it's sort of, in a way, if I were in a position to be mentoring you, I'd say don't give that up because that allows you to achieve scale in terms of
Mm.
affecting the world in it. Like, you can literally say Melanie Whitney is helping make the world a more mindful place. She teaches this coursework at said university.
Yeah.
And then, of course, and she's available one-on-one if you want that one-on-one time with Melanie. She's doing because it's really interesting when I think about that. Just hearing you say it, I mean, you have that aha moment, but then you also have this group of young people who you're literally taking through a point in time where you can
Hmm.
have such like dramatic impact. Like people who start meditating, people who start doing the work, the mindfulness practice, and all of the self awareness, if they learn that at age 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever ages you're teaching it
Yes.
at, like you are single handedly making the world a better place because you're making them better and then they're making other people better. It's sort of like, it's that sort of snowballing or mushroom effect. It just keeps getting better and
Yeah.
better and better. And so that's really interesting. So,
And they have a
so
different energy too. That young energy, it's different. They're so open. They're so open, and a lot of my coaching clients are, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they're a little bit more reluctant. They're a
well,
little more like I have to bend them a little bit more.
Well, it's really interesting. So you show up in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 40s or 50s, I'll speak to. You show up and you invest in the coaching because you want to do the work. But guess what? The work's hard. And so you're trying to live your life, do your job, maybe have a family, all these other things, and trying to do the work. So the application of it, it's not easy. And it's finding
Mm-mm.
that self-care time to really commit to it. And it's harder. You're set in your ways. But to your point of the young, the Gen Zs, like the openness, the fluidity, the willingness to see things differently because they want to set the terms of what their future looks like, right? They're not going to,
Yep.
they're going to dictate how they're going to live their life versus us putting that on them. And that's interesting because I even think about my 28-year-old daughter who has single-handedly shifted her mindset about what life, this is what society says, this is what the system says, and
Mm.
this is how I'm going to live
Mm-hmm.
my life. And so
Mm-hmm.
like making a wholesale change, which is scary because you lose a lot of people along the way if they're not on the journey with you.
Yes, you do. And that is hard for people.
How has it been for
Very,
you?
very hard.
So you've been on
Losing
this
people along
journey.
the way.
Well, have you or not really? Or
Oh,
the
totally. Totally have lost people along the way. And it was really painful while it was happening because you're so used to certain people being in your life or certain dynamics in relationships that you've tolerated for a long time. And then you become aware of how dysfunctional they are. And then it's the letting go, it's the grieving again. It's really grieving either an expectation or a person or a hope that you had that this person could change. And it's that really gave me a lot of my strength though. Once I was able to go through the process, I was like, wow, I can do anything. If I can let go of people that I love tremendously and still love. And when I say let go, it doesn't mean like, bye, get out of my life forever. Sometimes it means that. But other times it just means, okay, well, I guess this is the depth of our relationship. We can't go any deeper. And that's unfortunate. Right.
mm,
And accepting those limitations was painful. However, it taught me how much I'm capable of. And that power and that liberation is priceless.
I thank you for sharing that. That's amazing, and I can so relate to it. It's really hard when you have certain things in your life, people in your life who you love dearly, but they might.
Mhm.
I'm not sure. I mean, this isn't a bad way to say it, but it might not serve you anymore. Not that they don't serve you, but the nature of the dynamic and the relationship doesn't
I
serve
say
you.
that
It's
all the
not
time.
healthy.
Yes.
It's not healthy.
Mhm.
So it's not that I don't love you. I wish you all the best, but like maybe, different relationships have different seasons. I went through
Yep.
the same period, heavy grieving, like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, what a loss, what a loss. But interesting to your comment of sort of you rise out, you rise stronger and you
Do.
realize no, I'm capable and it's going to be okay. And it's going to be more than okay. It's going to be awesome because I can and I will prevail
Yep.
in whatever the context is. So I think it's interesting. It's
You
really,
know, this reminds me, I
mm,
watched, I went to, it wasn't too long ago, it was maybe a couple months ago. Michelle Obama was doing a book tour and Oprah was interviewing her. And
hmm
there was this comment, they were talking about friendship. And Oprah asked Michelle Obama if all her friends prior to the presidency made it with her to the White House. And she said, no, not everybody made it. Not
Interesting.
everybody made that transition. And they were, bantering back and forth. But then Oprah said this phrase, and I'll never forget it. And she said, they couldn't make the climb. They ran out of oxygen. So saying like when you
Mm,
are going up the mountaintop, right, you're elevating in your life, not everyone's going to have enough oxygen to keep climbing with you. They're going to have to stop or turn back and go back down.
that's beautiful.
And that visual was just like, oh my
Right.
gosh. Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
And
I
I think
have
when we do the
goosebumps.
inner
I
work,
can, that,
yes, when we do the inner work, like for me, what that translated, I mean, that hit me like a ton of bricks when she said that. I was like, okay, so doing the inner work is what gives me oxygen to keep climbing. But some people don't want to keep doing that inner work. And so they find a summit that they just kind of stay at. And again, no judgment, no judgment. It's like, okay, if that serves you, wonderful. I'm going to keep going.
and I love that. And I'm keeping going too. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I love that. And what a fantastic analog, like just
Yeah.
to think about, because you, as you said, you can visualize it.
Hmm.
That's pretty stunning. It's like about leveling up and knowing that, what you need to do to be able to level up. And
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, other people won't be able, they don't have the oxygen. That's great. Wow. So we're finishing up on your story. Is there anything else you want to share? So you're at the top. You're continuing to climb. You're not reaching any summit. You've got your oxygen. Talk to us a little bit more about that before we move on.
I really feel like this point in my story, it's really just about it's now like I feel like I for a long time was at like a base camp. If we're gonna keep going on with the same analogy, I was at a base camp for a long time, training and like getting myself
Mm.
ready to because the next mountain I wasn't ready for as bad as I wanted to climb it. And I'm so impatient. I mean, I practice mindfulness because I'm so impatient. And I'm just like, let's go, let's go. Like I'm that type of energy, like, let's go now. But the universe very much was like, not yet. You got all these lessons to learn. I was like, ugh. So I felt like I was at that base camp for a long time. And I finally feel like I've been given my oxygen tank. It's like, all right, it's time for the climb. And I'm like, yay, let's go. So there's just so much newness right now, new opportunity. I just became a LinkedIn instructor, which was awesome.
Mm.
And like things like that, new contracts and other things I'm doing with other folks. I'm just like, oh my gosh, okay. Let's do this. Right now, a lot of my focus has been something I've prolonged for too long is YouTube. I've been wanting to put my teachings because as you see on Instagram and TikTok, these are short format. And it's while it is fun to be able to give people little bites of information, I feel like it doesn't go deep enough. And I want to go deep.
I
I want to
love
give them
that.
the real stuff. I want to give them tools so they could really do the work if they want to. And so I'm excited about developing the YouTube channel as well because I feel like I'll actually be able to go into long format like this podcast episode is long format and you can really get into the nitty-gritty of something. So that's where I'm at. I'm climbing the mountain right now, finally. I'm excited about it.
That's awesome. And I have to really applaud you because I think going deep, it's like living on the surface is like all the external stuff. Going deep is when
Mhm.
you figure it out. And that is exactly what will give you the oxygen you need to climb and to get to where you want to
Exactly.
go. I mean, that's brilliant. And I do want to leave with the one comment, tying it all back to the power of now. Because we had that discussion, previous discussion. It's
Yeah.
important because if you're living at current in the present and you're experiencing this moment and you have the oxygen, that means tomorrow you can wake up and you can continue the climb versus seeing how are you feeling now, as we talked about the power of now, which you both love the book. How do you feel about that now as you have the oxygen? Are you still seeing your future so much, or are you really trying to live in the now?
So I can happily report that after lots of practice, I am very much able to, I don't attach myself to the future anymore. I used to really develop goals because I'm very type A mindset, right? As a teacher, you kind of have to be. And I can plan the shit out of anything. Like, That's my brain. That's like, I could really do it.
Mm,
But the problem was I was becoming attached to a specific outcome. And that was really messing me up. So I've learned to use those principles of there's this one specific quote in the book. I don't know what page it's on, but he talks about the sun and the moon. And he talks about how the moon really has no source of light of its own. It borrows from the sun. And he says that the moon is the future and the sun is the present. And the moon is just borrowing attention, borrowing light from the now. So when you think about the future, it
mm,
looks like the moon has light. It looks like the future has like its own source of light, but it doesn't. So like don't be deceived by that. So I look at the future and I remember that it's borrowed from the now and the things I do now. And then I lovingly release. I'm like, okay, that's a really awesome goal. If we can hit that, that'd be great. I'll do all the things I need to do. But if I end up somewhere else, that's okay too. So it's that surrendering.
I love that. Thank you. That is just brilliant. And I think the thing is to the point of you might hit the goal, but you might end up in an actually in a better place
Yes.
because maybe you even lose focus of the goal and you end up in a better place because you're doing the work.
Yes.
I yeah, I mean
Exactly.
it seems so esoteric when you talk about when we talk about it like doing the
Yeah.
work. What is the work? But like really excavating and figuring yourself out and
Yes.
then not attaching one's self and one's life to an outcome. And I think that I
Yes.
always tried to teach my kids it's all about the process. We used to say it's all about the process. Enjoy the
1,000%.
process. I used to say life is a journey. And they used to make fun of me because I had like my life as a
They
focus
did.
group of blah. Mom, life is a journey because I would write all these headlines for city, all these different brands.
Mhm.
And now they say, Mom, life is a journey. 10, 15 years later. Life
Aw.
is a journey. I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't say anything. I pretend like I don't know that I said it 15, 20 years. They
I
used
have
to
no idea what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. What do you mean life's a journey? Yeah, I mean, I never said that. But anyway, but that's the point. That's the whole point
Mhm.
is that so I like the surrendering, and I've been having interesting
Yes.
conversations, not just with some women in the podcast, but in my life about that. And
Mm.
I think that's a
Yeah.
wonderful thing. So we're going to move on.
Okay.
Your story is fascinating and you articulate it so beautifully. What would you say your superpowers, plural, are, Melanie?
Plural. Okay, we're gonna do
Yes.
plural.
Come on, you have well more than
I
one.
I really think one of my superpowers is my ability it's so funny because I feel like every superpower, if you're not careful, can easily become like your kryptonite. Like
Mm,
it's really about a balance.
mm-hmm.
And because right now I was just about to say that one of my superpowers is my ability to identify and see patterns in human behavior. Like I'm
Interesting.
really good about, and I've been like that since I was a child. Like since I was a kid, I could tell you when my dad does X, Y, and Z, I notice that then this happens and then this is going to happen. And I could see it 20 steps before it would happen
You could
because it was
forecast
like,
the family dynamic. That's
yes, I could
hilarious.
yes. Yes,
Wow.
I was forecasting the climate, right? And so I'm really good at that. And I mean, look where I ended up, right? Teaching human communication and behavior in relationships, right? So duh, look where I ended up. But what's really interesting about that is if I focus too much on that, if I use that inappropriately, it can easily get me in a space where I'm overanalyzing, overthinking, getting anxious, getting stressed, worried, because I'm always in an anticipation because it's future oriented if I'm trying to forecast patterns, right? So it's really interesting to see how that can play out in different ways. And sometimes people don't want to know their patterns. They're not ready. I've had conversations candidly with like a friend who was venting recently about something and I thought to myself, you don't see the why. Like this is why it's happening because you do this and then this happens and it's just a cycle you've done about 3 times now. And I candidly kind of said, this is my best friend. So I was like, you don't see that? And she was like, well, I geez, I didn't know you were watching me so closely. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not. It's just, I couldn't help it. It's how my brain works. And she's like, well, I guess I never thought about that. Do I really do that often? And then she kind of started feeling insecure. And I was like, oh my God, like I didn't mean it like that. And it was kind of messy. We landed fine. But again, you have to be kind of careful when I share these things, because maybe people are not ready for that information. So
I
that's
was
what I mean by
just
I have to
thinking
kind of be
that.
careful.
That is kryptonite. You have to be careful. Some things are better left kept up here. That's in your brain, every audience.
Yes.
Observations. Check, check, check. I seriously, I think that's an interesting point. So that's a really interesting superpower. What else?
Mhm.
You
I
have
would
wit.
say another one.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's so strange to think about like the superpowers. I'm very determined. Once I have my mindset to something, game over. Like, and that again, that can be wonderful. But I also now have learned I need to know when to quit, like when to take a step back, when to let go a little bit. Okay, maybe I'm being too focused. Now I need to like relax, loosen the reins a little bit, let some flow in, right? I'm not letting flow. So I am very, very determined. And I think that examination of myself and having that determination in the inner work of what's happening in my mind, what's happening in my outer world, how are things aligning to allow my goals to manifest is really what helps my clients to be able to do that in their own lives and help them uncover their own superpowers, their own sense of what fires you up. What's your determination? What gets you going? So that has been something I've examined because, as you know, running your own business, no one's gonna cheer you on but you. Like you
Exactly.
have to find the willpower to get creative on the days where you're like, I don't feel creative today. But you gotta
You have
come
to
out with another
have the,
podcast episode.
yeah.
You gotta whatever it is.
It's so interesting. I was just having this conversation with my daughter, and I said, if you're in a state of flow, she's in the process of creating content for a company. I said, keep
Oh,
creating, don't
nice.
stop. When you're in flow, keep going. Like, better to work
Mhm.
late and take the next day off, because you won't, that flow state is so, it is, you have to honor, it's so sacred. Uh,
It
and,
is.
so I honor the flow state, and sometimes I can't turn my computer off till like crazy hours, and sometimes I'm a little less intense. But yeah, there is a couple of things that I've noticed just on the short time of getting to know you. Well, you're an incredible teacher, so like
Oh,
that's a
thank you.
superpower, being able to distill and be able to communicate and discern information and make it relatable to people. Right? So I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
you're right. I have been told that I make complicated things easy to understand. And I
and
didn't realize that was a superpower.
well, also the way in which you do it in such a natural, easy way. And, as you said earlier, you said you have different students have different ways of learning. And so the
Yeah.
simpler you can take a complex idea and make it digestible in ways, using different methods of communication, different ways of visualizing something. That's really really powerful skill. And then the self-awareness is a superpower,
Mm,
right? So
yes.
uh,
I
I
would
mean,
definitely say that is I didn't have that superpower for a long time. And I think that's a superpower that we all can cultivate if we want it. I don't know if there's anything. I think everything starts there. Like when people tell me, well, how do you become more mindful? Or how do you have healthy relationships? Or how do I achieve my goal? How do I, everybody wants to know the how. And I feel like if you don't know yourself, that's, that's number one. That's square step number one. Like you got to
mhm,
start there. In my opinion, I just think everything starts with yourself. Can you examine yourself? Can you move your ego aside and can you examine yourself? I'm slowly writing a book. One day it will get published, but it's slowly, just bit by bit, I'm writing it.
awesome.
There's this one chapter that right now what we're talking about just made me think of about a lot of us struggle with really quieting our ego or examining our ego, pulling ourselves out and looking at what is the ego asking for? A lot of the time it's validation, praise, and approval.
Mm.
And being able to examine that, I started thinking of myself. I was like, how would I describe myself? Like, what am I doing when I'm sitting with these clients and I'm helping examine their ego? And really, I made a joke with my wife. I had said, I was feeling triggered about something. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I was feeling triggered about something. It was very much in my ego. And I could feel it, because there's a lot of signs. And I told her, I was like, look, we need to pause this conversation because my ego is raging and I cannot sedate her. So like I made a joke. I was like trying to sedate her and it's not working. So I
That's
need
very
a
cute.
minute. Like I need some time. And when I said sedate, it made me think of like is it an anesthesiologist in like a surgery
Yes,
that is giving,
yes,
to
yes,
sedate, right?
yes.
So I was like, okay, I think kind of that's what I'm teaching people to do is like sedate their ego. We don't want to kill the ego. The ego has use. The ego it gets a bad rep, right? The ego. There are good uses for the ego. But I was like, we just sometimes need to sedate it so we can examine it, cut open our soul a little bit, get in there, right? But the ego doesn't like the digging. The ego does not like that. The ego, if the ego is awake, it's like, what are you doing? Like, sew me back up. Like, don't look inside there. So it's funny when that happened, when we had that conversation, I was like, oh my God, it's kind of like doing soul surgery on people. I like have to sedate their ego a bit.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, soul surgery.
Yeah. So I was like, I think I'm doing like a little bit of soul surgery because I have to sedate the ego a little bit, but I can't do it too much, right? Because again, the ego is useful, especially when we're trying to achieve goals. And then I got to go in there, rewire some stuff, stitch it back together, wake up the ego a little bit and have them coexist. They need to learn how to, when I say the soul, I think about our self awareness, our conscious mind, right? So our consciousness and our ego need to learn how to coexist with one another. And when one needs to, take the wheel, I don't think the ego should ever be driving, but it could sit in the front seat sometimes instead of the back.
Oh, that is, I just, wow. Thank you for that education. I've been working, I've been working on killing my ego and it's been really hard. So
It
maybe,
is.
maybe I go for I've been kind of in a soul surgery for 4 years now. And what I didn't realize is that I can't kill my ego because I need my ego. I'm sedating
Yeah.
my ego. And
Sometimes,
in all
yeah.
seriousness, and I think even the motivation to build under the sisterhood was getting my voice back because I sedated myself. I was sort of like was in a coma for a few years, and now I'm getting my voice back and my ego back. So, and they're learning how to coexist. So that's really, I love that. That's an awesome way to describe it. Really, wow. So I'm going to re-listen to this quite a bit. So how
Okay.
do you how do you use these amazing superpowers, which are so rich and complex, to help other women? So I know
You
that you work
know,
a lot with
yeah.
men, but talk about how you help women.
No, yeah, I definitely I love working with women who are in leadership
Mm,
and are like struggling to own their leadership and their voice a lot of the
mm,
time. That is where I really see a lot of the superpowers, so to speak, that I have is really just it's like teaching. I don't know, I struggle with saying that I empower people because I don't personally. Like you have to empower yourself. I'll show you how to use the tools, but then it's on you to use them, And so I think it's really, again, a lot of one, I think the patterns that I talked about, how I can really identify patterns well, I think that helps people, especially women, look inside of themselves at their own limiting beliefs, things that are holding them back. A question I often ask my clients, female or male, I say, and when did you decide that to be true? Like when they say that they can't do something, or I can't do that, or I don't like conflict, or I don't, I'm like, okay, and when did you decide that to be true? Let's examine that. Right. So asking them the right questions, being able to help clients identify when their ego is in practice and when their soul, their heart, their essence is trying to come into light, but maybe is too scared to, doesn't feel safe to. So it's really, I think, I almost feel like when I'm working with clients, we have these knots and we're just trying to untangle them. That's all
mm.
we're doing. right? We're just untangling. I'm like, okay, let's pull on this cord. Let's see what happens. Okay, no, okay, let's try this. And sometimes when we have someone else to help us go through the junk, I'm gonna call it. Like, have you ever moved out of a house and you're like, how the hell do I have this much stuff? You're like, I didn't know I owned this many things.
Yeah, I actually have.
There you go. There you go.
Literally 4 years ago. Yes. So,
Isn't it
mm,
nice to have someone help you go through all those things, organize, put them in boxes, get rid of things? Should I hold on to this? No. And your friend's like, no, get rid of it. When's the last time you used that? And you're like, 2 years ago. And so it's really, I see it as a partnership of just we're going through the boxes that they've compartmentalized away inside of their lives, inside of themselves, and seeing what can we let go of. And I say what you said, Elizabeth, a lot. Is this still serving you? And
mm,
sometimes people say no, but they're not ready to let go of it. And I say, okay, hold on to it then a little longer. That's
mm,
fine. As long as you know that it's not serving you, at least that's progress. Because before it was just an unconscious thing you allowed in your life. But now at least you've said, okay, I know it's not serving me, but I'm not ready to let go. Okay, fair enough. That's okay.
mm.
So I really
Wow.
feel like that's how I'm bringing all those superpowers together.
That's amazing. And I love that actually. And I would imagine, particularly for women, because I do think, back to that comment about women willing to do the work, to dig deeper, to
Yeah.
go in and unlock the limiting beliefs, to have that because they are more willing, in my mind,
Hmm.
or observation, to have someone like you to do that with, to guide them through that process. Because guess what? It's pretty friggin' scary, coming to terms with you, accepting you, acknowledging you,
Accepting
seeing
you.
yourself, right?
Well, and making yourself a priority. I mean, women are also taught that, oh, I need to take care of, put in X person here, your kids, your partner, your colleagues, everybody else's needs before your own, right? We so often put ourselves second, third, fourth, fifth. So to commit to like a coaching program or to commit to a course or to commit to anything like this where you're doing the journey with someone, you have to prioritize yourself. You literally have to. And I think that's a big hesitation sometimes for women in particular to be like, okay, I'm going to dedicate Thursday mornings or Thursday evenings or whenever we do our coaching, and my kids are going to have to figure out what the hell they're going to eat that day. Or like they're going to have to figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, they are. For 1 hour, they're going to figure it out. You and I are going to make this about you. So I
Mm,
see that really big with my female clients.
wow. Thank you. I am going to ask you a question that we really didn't talk about, but this is a platform for you, to give a message to women around the world of all ages, of all backgrounds. As long as they identify with being a woman, and all
Hmm.
cultures. Like, what do you want to say to them, Melanie?
Oh, I guess when you say that, I think of little Melanie. Like,
Mm,
we all have an inner child. And I
mm,
guess me before my awakening or whatever you want to call it, I guess I needed to hear, and this would be my message, is that you're doing enough. You are enough. And who you are today doesn't have to be your end point. This is just where you're at right now. So be in flow, let the journey unfold. And as long as you trust and you believe in yourself, everything's going to be okay.
I love that. This has been a wonderful conversation. I am so honored and grateful for this time with you, Melanie. During Women's History Month, you are making history and doing amazing things on behalf of the world, the community, and of course of women. Thank you.
Thank you for doing what you do and giving us this space.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Zach Slaff, and edited by Zach Slaff. The music is by Ayla Schaefer, her song, Rose.